the architecture built from fear. It wasn't designed all at once. It emerged piece by piece, after moments of shock, panic, and regret. Each layer added in response to something that once went wrong. And together, those layers form an architecture shaped not by optimism, but by fear. To understand why this matters today, we have to look at how systems remember pain. Every crisis leaves behind more than rules. It leaves behind instincts. The instinct to prevent repetition. The instinct to block vulnerability. The instinct to build defenses strong enough to make fear feel distant. After trust fractured, protection accelerated. New safeguards were introduced. Old ones were reinforced. Complexity increased, not because it was desired, but because it felt safer than simplicity. Each addition addressed a specific risk, but also narrowed flexibility. The early results looked reassuring. Fewer surprises, more oversight, tighter controls. The system felt armored against chaos. What had once been unpredictable now seemed contained. Fear receded from the surface. But beneath that armor, behavior adapted. Participants learned how to operate within the new structure. Risk shifted rather than disappeared. Innovation bent around constraints. The system grew safer in familiar dimensions, but less curious about unfamiliar ones. The reveal began to surface here. Fear had not just inspired protection, it had shaped design. Decisions were no longer guided by what could work best, but by what could not be allowed to fail. Avoidance replaced exploration. This architecture did not emerge from paranoia. It emerged from memory, from lessons learned the hard way, and those lessons carried weight. Yet systems built primarily to avoid pain often struggle to move forward freely. Because fear is an excellent teacher, but a poor architect. The tension was forming quietly. The system had become resilient to yesterday's dangers. But it was not yet clear how it would face tomorrow's. As the architecture hardened, its influence spread beyond detection and into behavior itself. Decisions were filtered through layers of precaution. Approval chains lengthened. Margins for error shrank. What once required judgment now required compliance. Institutions adapted quickly. Success was measured by absence of failure rather than presence of progress. Avoiding mistakes became more valuable than pursuing breakthroughs. In a structure built from fear, safety earned rewards while ambition invited scrutiny. Markets reflected this shift with precision. Capital favored predictability. Novel ideas struggled to pass through dense frameworks of verification. Risk premiums rose not because danger increased, but because tolerance declined. The system was secure, but cautious to the point of hesitation. The reveal deepened as complexity multiplied. Each safeguard addressed a specific threat, but together they created opacity. Understanding the whole system became difficult even for those operating within it. Fear had driven construction, but clarity had been sacrificed along the way. This created a new vulnerability. When systems grow complex to prevent failure, they often become fragile in unexpected ways. Interactions multiply, dependencies hide. Small changes can have disproportionate effects. The architecture that once felt protected began introducing its own risks. The early conflict sharpened here. The system was strong against known dangers, but awkward when facing new ones. Adaptation slowed. Innovation bent around constraints rather than reshaping them. Fear had produced safety, but at the cost of agility. Participants sensed the weight. Everything worked, but nothing moved easily. Progress required navigating layers built to say no. The architecture held firm, but it also held back. The system had learned how to protect itself from collapse. It had not yet learned how to grow without fear. The emotional peak arrived when the system began encountering challenges it could not easily classify. Not crises born of excess or recklessness, but changes driven by technology, behavior, and shifting expectations. These threats did not look like the past, and fear-built architecture struggled to recognize them. Institutions responded instinctively. When uncertainty appeared, they reached for existing defenses. More controls, more oversight, more caution. But these tools were designed to block familiar dangers, not interpret new ones. The system reacted, yet it did not adapt. This was the heart of the conflict. Architecture built from fear excels at preventing repetition. It is far less effective at enabling evolution. By focusing on what must not happen again, it narrows attention away from what might happen next. Innovation exposed this weakness sharply. New models challenged old assumptions. New risks emerged outside traditional boundaries. But instead of engaging with them directly, the system often pushed them to the edges, where oversight was thinner and understanding weaker. Fear redirected risk rather than resolving it. The emotional weight of this moment came from realization. The architecture that once felt protective was now constraining learning. Each safeguard reduced flexibility. Each control slowed response. The system was resilient, but increasingly reactive rather than anticipatory. Pressure mounted as opportunities slipped past. Competitors outside the architecture moved faster. Adaptation occurred elsewhere. The system remained intact, but relevance began to feel less certain. The build-up was complete. A structure designed to prevent yesterday's collapse was struggling to prepare for tomorrow's change. Fear had built walls high enough to stop known threats, but it had also limited the view beyond them. The resolution did not require tearing the architecture down. It required rethinking why it had been built. Fear had shaped the system for survival, but survival alone was no longer enough. The climax arrived in a quiet realization. Protection cannot be the sole organizing principle of a living system. What defends against the past must also leave room for the future. Architecture built only to prevent harm eventually prevents movement. In response, the system began to change its posture, not by removing safeguards, but by loosening their grip. Controls were simplified. Judgment was reintroduced where rigidity had replaced it. Fear was acknowledged, but no longer allowed to dominate every decision. The resolution reshaped priorities. Resilience came to mean more than resistance. It meant adaptability, the ability to absorb new information, respond creatively, and evolve without waiting for failure to force change. Protection remained, but it stopped being the system's identity. What endured was a critical lesson. Fear is a powerful motivator in moments of danger, but when it becomes a blueprint, it limits what a system can become. Growth requires exposure. Learning requires uncertainty. Progress requires space to move. The architecture built from fear had done its job. Now it had to make room for something else. Because systems that only know how to survive eventually forget how to advance. And survival without advancement is its own quiet form of decline. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes a beginning of a new future. The